Greetings, good morning, and welcome to Mind the Moment. This, my friends, is our coffee house in the cloud, a place to come together, build community, get centered, and find out just what the present moment has to present to us. It is September 18th, 2020, which is considered in some quarters to be National First Love Day. The first flickering flames of love are often characterized or experienced as the sort of passion that borders on zealotry or madness. But Sharon Salzberg, mindfulness master par excellence, reminds us that, quote, when we feel love, our mind is expansive and open enough to include the entirety of life in full awareness, both its pleasures and its pains. We feel neither betrayed by pain or overcome by it, and thus we can contact that which is undamaged within us regardless of the situation, end quote. And so even if your first soul pulverizing crush has been mostly or mercifully forgotten, whether it was the boy next door or the girl you were paired with in science class on frog dissection day, you might still celebrate this as a mind-expanding or mindfulness-expanding experience in which full awareness of life first flowered. I'm John Roberts from Harvard Pilgrim Health Care's mindfulness program. Joining me as she does most Fridays is the founder and director of our program, Tara Healey. Good morning, Tara.
Good morning, John. Good morning, everyone. Good to be with you today.
Tara, do you remember your first love?
I do.
You can tell me the details later.
I do. Yes. He was the boy up the street.
All right. Very good. Where is he now? Maybe still up the street. Who knows?
Nope, he's in New York City, and I'm still in touch with him. Yep.
In just a moment, Tara will lead us in a guided meditation, after which we'll get ourselves into some Q&A. That's where you come in. Take a moment, if you would, to open up the chat box, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. Once you have that chat box open, please submit any questions or comments that you have at any time. You don't have to wait for the end. And as a way to get our fingers warmed up here, Tara, is there anything that you'd like to ask folks to type in about as we're getting started?
Yes, yeah, I would love to. So, you know, I have been thinking a lot about the changing of the seasons, and it seems always like we go from this sort of extreme heat to cold. I'm not sure it happens as quickly as I think it does. It's probably a little more gradual, but thinking a lot about the fall and autumn. And so my question is, you know, as we're in a transition, but we're moving into this next season of autumn or fall. What's one thing that you appreciate about this time of year, that you enjoy, that you like, that brings you comfort? So we don't have to go beyond fall. So we're just right here. What is maybe one thing that you like about this time of year?
All right, thoughts on fall? Well, folks are taking a moment to respond. Thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. Keep in mind that only Tara and I will be able to see anything that you type. And if we don't have a chance to read your particular question or comment out loud, please know that we do read and value them all. As we close, which will be right around 9 a.m., I will make mention of some other ways that you can keep in touch with us as well. Okay, so many things rolling in. Somebody says they are looking forward to foliage. Soup, yes, soup. Getting back to routine. Wearing warmer clothes, apple cider, sleeping with blankets on, crispness of the air, that's another crisp air, 2 in a row, smell of fallen leaves, fires in the fire pit, so beautiful, the person says, apples that crunch. Wow, wow, what an evocative list there. Tara, What are you looking forward to?
Well, I mean, you know, like, gosh, I think everything that everybody said is, you know, hits home for me. But the one thing is that I made a pot of chili the other day, and I usually don't do that until fall. And it just was so nice and comforting and fragrant and just, yeah, So I think making soup.
Well, and I'm noticing what you are saying, what so many people are saying in the chat box has to do with the sensory experience, about really engaging the
Yeah.
senses. And whenever you are opening up the sense doors, flinging them open, as it were, there is this opportunity to to soak in that moment a little bit. So I don't know if that's unique to fall per se, but it certainly seems that the things of fall invite that. So maybe
Yeah, no, I think
maybe
that's
fall is the most
true.
mindful season. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. It really awakens the senses in so many ways. And I think the practice can kind of even heighten that experience, because the more present we are, the more, we can take in, especially the parts of fall that we love and feel comforted by and connect with.
Well, Tara, I think that is a excellent segue into asking you to begin priming us for mindfulness with a bit of meditation.
Yes. Okay, great. All right, so let's go ahead and settle into either the seated or the standing posture as we normally do. And the eyes, of course, can be open or closed. And if you decide to keep them open, you want to gaze downward a little bit just to help remove peripheral distraction. And otherwise, allowing the eyes to close. And let's start this morning with a deep inhalation through the nose and a bit of a longer exhalation through the mouth. So go ahead and do a couple of those on your own. And as we're settling into the seated or standing posture, just notice your body. Notice the sensations occurring from the activity of your day so far. Perhaps aware of the points of contact with the body and the surface. Aware of how you're holding yourself with a spine that is straight but not stiff. Allowing the body to soften around the spine. And just aware of pulsing, vibration, perhaps temperature. And let's for a moment allow sound to enter our field of awareness, either sound in the room or outside of the room. With a receptive attitude, there isn't a need to label what's making it, but just receptive. And beginning to bring the awareness back inward to the whole body. So whole body awareness with sound remaining in the background. And just begin to notice the rhythm of your breath. And please know that however you're breathing is fine. The body knows how to regulate. Just begin to notice as you breathe where in the body it's most noticeable. And it could be the rise and fall of the belly, abdomen. You might notice it around the chest or even the nostrils, the air entering and leaving. And it's also fine to have kind of a wider lens, whole body breathing in, whole body breathing out. So selecting that one particular area that you connect with the most, so that as the mind wanders, you can bring yourself back gently without judgment to that particular place, tracking those sensations in, the subtle pause at the height of the breath, the exhalation, the subtle pause. What's it like to breathe in and to breathe out? Where do you notice the breath? Noticing where the mind is, and gently releasing thought, memory, planning, and escorting the attention, your awareness back to breath sensation. The breath acting as an anchor for the wandering mind. And again, noticing where the mind is, softening the body and reconnecting with your anchor. And as you feel ready, beginning to open the eyes if they were closed, and reconnecting with each other.
Thank you, Tara. I'm just noticing, I guess I feel like I have to share in the chat box. Somebody I mentioned from earlier, one thing I don't like is the pumpkin spice everything about fall. And I agree with that. So on that note.
Oh, and John, I'm seeing somebody saying my anchor is tinnitus.
Oh, wow.
And
Very interesting.
that's a really interesting anchor to work with rather than fight against it and resist it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. We could do a whole program on that, I think. But well, on that note, I do want to make sure that everyone feels welcome and encouraged to ask Tara questions or make comments. I see that you already are feeling encouraged, so that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But let me actually get us rolling though in this portion of the session today. So Tara, I always do love having the chance to watch you teach and interact with students, as I was able to do earlier this week during one of the sessions that we were hosting for a client of ours.
Yeah.
During the Q&A portion of that session, a question came up that I think it would be helpful to have you address here in this forum.
Sure.
I think it's a common question, which a lot of folks may also have. So the question was about apps. And the individual asking the question said that he had been enjoying a particular mindfulness app and 10% happier was one, but he was concerned. He asked, is it ironic that I would be depending on technology in order to develop mindfulness? And he followed this up by asking, is there a danger that I will begin using the app as a crutch as opposed to using it as a support for practice? So I wonder if you can readdress how you responded to him, and if there's any additional thoughts you've had since you actually responded.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a question that I have heard before, and I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate it because I've also been listening to a podcast called Your Undivided Attention. And it's a really, really good podcast by Tristan Harris is the, where he talks about technology and what it's doing, what it's potentially doing to us. But so the question is a good one. And as you can imagine, it has come up in the past. And the way that I respond to it is that, because this guy in particular, and I would say most of the people that bring this up, connect with the app. He said he's been trying to get a regular, coherent, sustainable practice for 10 years. And this is the first time that he's really been able to have a regular practice is using the app. Now, there's probably other factors that played into why he's got a regular practice now. But I think that what we need when we're using technology as a support, we're using it in a way that's skillful and helpful and useful. And we can use our developing awareness to see when we're using it in a way that is not helpful or leaning toward a more addictive kinds of habits. So you really use the awareness that you're cultivating to check yourself. And I think, so with things like an app that is guiding you on practice, and 10% Happier is one of the best ones out there. The information is so accurate. The teachers are actually some of the most stellar teachers in the country, so you're using it for good, as opposed to like being on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. Like, we use that for good too, but I think there can be more tendency to overindulge in it. Whereas,
Well, so this question actually really spoke to me on a personal level. So, my wife's grandmother recently gifted us with this really fancy baby bassinet, which you actually control with an app, and which is designed to detect exactly how much your baby is moving, and then provide tailored rocking and swaying programs and white noise to settle them down, right? And the thing is, it works really well, which is kind of the problem, because it works so well that my wife and I have been asking, are we allowing this machine to comfort our baby so that, like, we don't have to? Are we missing out on something? But
Yeah.
we realized that the bassinet is actually allowing us to get better sleep at night. And so it's allowing us to bring more attentiveness to the baby in all those other moments when we're with them. And so I think when people begin to develop mindfulness practice, this was true with me, it can be really useful to have a lot of supports in place, including apps. It allows you to sort of get into your rhythm as, like, what I think of as a new parent to your mindfulness practice, and get over those initial hurdles, as like, those initial early days. And then in time, if you want, you can wean off of these supports, maybe use the app a little bit less. More trusting. Well, and so that brings up a follow-up.
It's a great example.
Do you think it's important to wean off of something like an app, or is it okay if somebody uses an app for the next 40 years of their meditation practice?
Yeah, I mean, my guess is that, as you cultivate and develop your practice and you're learning through the various teachings and guided practices offered on the app, that you're actually not going to want to use it for the next 40 years. That it's just, you're just naturally going to have less connection to it because you don't need it as much. I mean, but there's nothing wrong. I mean, the assumption I think would be, and this still has to be tested because apps are relatively new, in our world, our society. I think, I still love being guided through meditation. I don't need that on a day-to-day basis, but certainly when I'm on retreat or, even at home, like I might listen to a guided practice that is just helpful. So,
what you're pointing out, what you're pointing out, which I think is interesting, is, apps have been around for 10 years on the outside. Meditation's been around for 2,500 at least. So it's, but so there's a lot of folks asking some questions. So let me see if I can knock some of these out. So somebody's asking, what is it tinnitus? I feel like tinnitus is one of the words I've only ever seen.
Yeah, tinnitus, I've heard it, but it's basically a ringing in your ears.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, and so
it's resulted from either a condition or some sort of hearing damage, and so it's a semi-permanent tone in the ear, right? So and I think it can be
incredibly annoying.
Right. But as you said, Tara, the more so if you are essentially trying to run away from it as opposed to working with it. So I want to say hi to my friend Ramesh, who is tuning in. Good to see you, Ramesh. So somebody asked, during a meditation, do you itch an itch? Tara, I think this is a question you get quite a bit. So I'll of course turn
love that question. Or do you need out a cramp? Like, so this is a good thing to practice with, so that if you have an itch, I'm going to say, don't actually scratch it. But anytime your attention is called from your primary object, so in this case, we used breath today, you always leave your primary object. Like that, just know that there's no need to stay with it. And, so you're being called by a cramp or an itch, allow your attention to go to that particular itch, and just hang there and let the sensations of the itch serve as your anchor where you're placing your attention. Because what you're learning through that, and this would be a cramp as well, is that itch or that muscle cramp had a birth, it has a life, and whether you scratch it or knead it out, it's going to go. It's of the nature to transition. And that's it seems simple, but it is a really significant thing that you're learning in this practice, that the nature of everything is to have an arise, to have a life, and to transition out. Like that's natural and normal, and we start to understand it at deeper levels. Now, that's not to say if you're having an itch and you want to scratch it, go ahead and scratch it. But it's a really interesting thing to experiment with, because it's going to go away whether you scratch it or not.
So somebody asked Tara if you would repeat the name of the podcast that you mentioned.
Oh, yes.
Ago.
And it's excellent. It's called Your Undivided Attention, Tristan Harris. He used to be, he was an engineer at Google and started to be really concerned with what technology was doing in terms of addiction and doing to our brains. He's really incredible. In fact, there's a movie on Netflix now called The Social Dilemma, and Tristan Harris was in part behind it. So that's also, you know, really interesting.
So Your Undivided Attention.
Yes,
fantastic.
the podcast. Yeah.
And somebody asks, this is an awesome question, although I don't know if we're going to have the answer to it. Is there any science that supports that practice, or is there any science that supports whether silent versus guided practice is more beneficial? Now, I don't believe there is, because in my understanding, what's being studied in most mindfulness research studies is what's happening from practice in general, not the type of practice. That being said, Tara, I think probably when people are being, when research subjects are being told to meditate in a certain way, they're probably using guided meditations. That's my guess, especially if they're new to practice.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know of any research either, John, if one is better than the other. And I think the thing to be aware of is what is most supportive to you at that particular moment, because you're really trying to settle attention, to kind of calibrate the mind, get some steadiness. That's the meditation part, so that mindfulness can work most effectively. Mindfulness just does its job better when there's some steadiness of attention. So that's where the meditation comes in. Well,
I suppose one can do their own sort of research study with, as you often say, Tara, with themselves as the scientist and the subject, and see, well, what works better for me, and it might change day to day as well. But
definitely, no, I think, John, day to day for sure, because there are some days if I feel especially unsettled or busy where a guided practice is really useful for me. So it's not like there's something wrong or it's more elementary at all.
Well, all good things must come to an end. So we will be back every Tuesday and Friday, folks, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can find the links to these sessions, other resources, at our main site, which is harvardpilgrim.org/mindfulness. If you have any questions for our experts that we did not get to here, or if you think of some later in the week, please email them to us at askmtm@harvardpilgrim.org, or you can leave me a voicemail. The number is 617-509-7047. Now, we'd love for you to check out the free resources around mindfulness and pain management, which we've produced in partnership with our friends at Mindful Magazine. Those resources can be found at mindful.org/pain. You can see all the stuff we've been up to lately on our Facebook page at facebook.com/mindthemoment. You can rewatch this session, older sessions, introductory sessions, and also the interviews which Tara conducted with mindfulness researchers on our YouTube page, youtube.com/mindthemoment. And a closing word, if I may, from Proust on love. He said, quote, "Few people understand either the purely subjective nature of the phenomenon of love, or how it creates a supplementary person who is quite different from the one who bears our beloved's name in the outside world, and is mostly formed from elements within ourselves," end quote. An argument on this National First Love Day to perhaps not pine too deeply for those first loves that did not work out, and a potent reminder to never ask our beloveds to be more than themselves, and yet to love them all the more for it. Tara, do you have any closing thoughts?
Since you started off with Sharon Salzberg and you're talking about love, I just happen to have this book, Real Love by Sharon. So I would highly recommend it.
It's a classic of the genre.
It's a classic. And the other thing, Sharon wrote a book called A Heart as Wide as the World. And this was back in the late 90s that doesn't get a lot of attention, but I think it's actually one of her better books.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yes, a deep cut. Very good. Thank you, Tara. I appreciate that. So thanks to everyone as well for joining. We will see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Great to be with you this morning.